Supplement. I'm Frank Lewis. Pat Moore was special. He didn't know how to say no. Recovering from his first crippling illness, he hobbled out to join us at various points along our walk from Bale to Ballybunion. On another programme, his enthusiasm and pride when we raced around North Kerry visiting Holy Wells. He showed the way. And nobody knows all of that better than the people of Pat Moore's native place, Asdee, where we are today. Between Ballybunion and Ballylongford, close by the Shannon Estuary, in memory of Pat Moore, friend, priest, author, broadcaster, and most importantly, a man who went out of his way to help. Born in Asdee in 1957, died on May the 1st of this year. Diagnosed with oesophageal cancer 2 years ago, he came back home to a place he never lost contact with, to Little Road, Asdee. Tullahinal, Tulloch on Immel, the hill of the Killen. From the stole, grew up beside the mill here in Tullahinal. Donald Kennedy, the landlord, Blacker Douglas, a lawyer from Armagh and Dublin, leased 1,000 acres in Kerry from Trinity College in 1824, building it up to 21,000 acres, with 400 acres here in Tullahinal, where your grandfather was.
My great-grandfather, Patsy Kennedy,
yeah, was the land steward. The mill was built during the famine.
Yes. Yes, in 47 it was going a thing, and
how did that happen? How did it happen that the mill was built at that time?
Well, I think there was extra. He took on extra people. He was told by the British government, "Can you take on extra workers and thing?" And he said, "No, I've got 14 workers. I'm happy with them." And he said, "Well, if you don't take on extra workers, they could end up in a workhouse and you'll have to pay for them. Mm-hmm. But if you take them on, we'll pay for them." Right. So he built the mill, and then he built.
Was that? I mean, just to stick with that for a second.
Yeah.
He built the mill.
Yeah.
But taking on the extra workers probably didn't help him in the long term, did it?
Oh, it did, because he did drain land and everything. He did
all
a lot of
that. It's unusual that brick buildings and the cobblestone of the mill are still intact. Owned by Olive McNamara. Yeah. We're talking to her cousin, Dan McNamara. When it was built, the bricks were made locally.
Yes, they were made down in Relahins Bog, as it is known now. Mm-hmm. They would have constructed a factory, and as been mentioned, they made clay pipes, and it was an industry in its own, in that they had fuel and that they had raw material on site to fire the kivens, and they had the mud to construct, to make that.
So they made a special place for doing all of that, yeah. Dan, a lot of activity here at the time of the Civil War.
Yes. There would have been drills and training going on here during the Civil War, and my uncle, who is now deceased, Olive's father, would have told the story that as a youngster, that he would have been put up on one of the men's shoulders and marched around the yard. And unfortunately, that man later died, was killed above in Galway in action. Good. And many years later, in the 90s, that man still cried after his friend that brought him around in his shoulders.
Were there other particular incidents?
Well, Cathal Brew would have come here as well. That Cathal Brew was to come to Ballylongford, and with things at the time, it was unsafe. So they would have gathered here in the building's yard.
You were describing that
yes,
as the first parliament.
The first All Ireland
met here.
Yes, in this yard, and at least 7. We are told at least 7 of the legal. That was illegal, of course, because the British were in charge then. But in 1919, the legal Dáil Éireann would have taken place in Dublin.
I know. But they gathered here first, and there was huge excitement on
the
day, obviously.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
A big crowd gathered.
Yeah. Over 200 people here. But, of course, the biggest event, I suppose, was that they had to create a diversion. So they advertised and had a big meeting, a gathering at Craigdarrow Crossroads, where about 400 people turned up. And there would have been as many, if not more, British Army personnel there to lift them. When that meeting was over, of course, they had to drag it out to cover the meeting here. Then they walked in all directions away from Craigdarrow. They went down
the British Army were all over the place.
They led them all over, a good view of North Kerry. But the ones here, I think, and I say, Michael Collins and Devon Era were in Limerick, but they were told not to come here because they were too well known. But that we know that Arthur Griffith spoke from the hayloft, and that Cathal Brew spoke from down here by the wall.
Gosh, amazing event. Donny O'Keefe, a friend of Pat Moore's, and a man who's done all of the contacting and arranging for today. You have a story. I mean, from Mortram, Ballylongford, Pat Joe, Edgeworth and his sister had an unusual find.
Yes, they were cleaning out the ashes from the fire one day, and the grate got stuck and they couldn't figure out, and they stuck it in their hands and they found what looked like to them a piece of metal or something that was blocking it, but it transpired to be a brooch. And the amazing thing about this brooch was that they sent it to the museum to be checked out, and it came from the 6th century, which was fascinating that it was back. It's over 1400 years old. So it just proves that what was going on here. And why the museum loved this piece was because they could pinpoint exactly where it was found, because it was cut from their bog in Tunnahindle North here, just in back of us. And they could pinpoint it to the exact spot, and that really made for fascinating the times.
And what did they think that this brooch was used for? What was the...
This brooch would have been used in ceremonials and rituals for the we'd say the chieftains, the
tied their cape or something.
Tied their cape and things like that, yes, and that. You know, it was fantastic, and Father Moore was really like these class of things because he was PP in Dewa at the time, and there in 1923 the parish priest that time, Father Beasley, was throwing some sods in the fire, and they found a ciborium in the sod before he put it in, and it was a silver ciborium, and it dates back to the penal times, and that's still used in Dewa as we speak at the moment altogether. And that